Hi peeps, it's me Lolly and Pop, and to start this video, I need to tell you about an obsession I've had since I was little. Stuffed animals. I have tons. You may also know that yellow is my favorite color, but something you didn't know about me is that cows are one of my favorite animals. All of these things combined prompted my younger sisters to get me this stuffed animal for Christmas. With the previous explanation, you may understand why it is that I immediately loved this stuffed animal. So much so that I would carry it with me around the house the first few days after Christmas. Not because I kept forgetting to take it to my bedroom. The problem with that is, she kept yelling at me. Draw me. What? No, I'm on my break. Draw me. When my Christmas break is over, maybe I'll draw me. Fine. So I gave in and did a few sketches. That was enough to satisfy her, but now I really wanted to draw her. So eventually, when I found a boring day that I was not spending with my family, I got to designing her. When designing this character, I had a pretty clear vision of what I wanted her to look like. A little yellow cowgirl, no, not a cowgirl, a little girl who is a cow, is a little chubbier on the bottom, same as the Squishmallow, and is wearing an overall skirt thing. The hardest thing to figure out was her head. How cow-like do I make her? Do I add something to her head so she doesn't look bald? If so, what? What about her eyes? Do I make them simple like the stuffed animal, or more complicated like how I normally draw eyes? On one of my attempts to cure her baldness, I tried to make her one of those fluffy cows, which looked really cute, but was just too different from the Squishmallow, so I had to ditch that. My solution to her baldness was just to accept it. She doesn't look bald if you don't think about it, but if you look too long, you'll definitely see it. For the eyes, I went with a simpler look, and thought of Eevee from Pokemon when drawing them. For the head shape, I, of course, kept it cartoony, but not so cartoony that her head was just a circle. The fluffy cow design is when I finally got over myself and looked up calf references, which is probably why the attempt you're currently watching turned out so well. With only one problem. She's way too old. She's beautiful, but too old. We can say that this is an older version of her or something. But now, all I had to do was create the younger version of the older version. At this point, I had also figured out that underneath her overall skirt, I wanted her to be wearing a fluffy turtleneck sweater. You won't catch me wearing that though. I do not like turtlenecks. When I finally got a design I was happy with, the attempt you're currently watching, she had big eyes but an even bigger smile, horns and big ears to try to hide the baldness, a fluffy, not perfectly spherical head, hooves for fingers and toes, a little tail you can't really see at this angle, lots of yellow spots in her fur, the ones in her face matching the stuffed animal, shorter but thick legs, and of course, a fluffy turtleneck sweater underneath an overall skirt. When picking the colors, the hardest part was deciding what color the clothes would be, as I already knew that she would be yellow. In my head, I had imagined her in blue or green, but tried pink as well just to make sure I didn't want that. Originally, I thought the overalls being darker color than the sweater would look better, but when I made the sweater darker is when I found the perfect colors. Before she was ever designed, I knew I wanted to make a painting of her, but the question was, of what? After sketching out a few ideas, I came up with her sitting in a field making flower crowns. I, much like with her design, had a few things I knew needed to be in this painting, one being a field or a meadow of some kind, and the other being that she had to have flowers around, specifically purple flowers. This is because, as you may have noticed in her final design, her name is Purple. Howdy. That was my younger sisters, who would kill me if they were not added to this video, but are actually relevant to what I'm sure you're currently thinking. Why is her name Purple when she's yellow? An excellent and perfectly understandable question. Well, you see, to answer that, I must first tell you about another stuffed animal I own. This cute little pink puppy was one of my favorite stuffed animals when I was little, which is why I was understandably devastated when I had lost him. To make up for this, my parents got me an exact replacement, to which sometime later, I don't know when, I don't even remember getting either of them, I found the original. That dog's name is Pink Puppy. But wait, it gets worse, because its replacement is Pink Puppy 2. Now we zoom closer to present day. One of the times Purple was harassing me to draw her, when one of my younger sisters asked me the reasonable question of, what's her name? Being a Squishmallow, she already had a name, but it was dumb and we all agreed she needed a different one. Trying to make a joke about little me's inability to name stuffed animals, because there are more than just those two, but those two are my most iconic. My younger sister said, you should name her Purple Cow. She meant yellow cow, but we thought it was so funny. Both are messing up the colors and just the concept of her being named the wrong color, so we decided to go with that. The official title we ended up with is Purple the Yellow Cow, but just Purple for short. Her name, and how she was lacking purple, also affected how I colored her. In my mind, there were only two directions I could take her. One where she loved purple so much it was her name, and the only color she wore. Or one where she had no particular connection to purple, it just happened to be her name. I did just think of a third option where she despises purple and wants nothing to do with it. But I went with the second option, because I have so many characters that are purple and yellow, because it's my favorite color scheme. So I wanted to change it up. Anyways, let's talk about what's actually going on in the painting. To transfer the sketch from digital to paper, I just traced it off my iPad. I chose to use acrylic paint instead of just drawing this digitally because I got more paint for Christmas, so I wanted to use them. Yeah, sorry if you thought it was because of some deep meaning or something. I just wanted to play with the stuff I got for Christmas. I wanted the background to be a light yellowish blue. Isn't that just green? No, they're different things. In the foreground, where purple is, will be darker because she's sitting under a tree, and therefore in the shade, and create some nice contrast to lead your eye to purple. Did I succeed in doing this? I don't know, but that was the goal. There are mountains in the back because I thought it would look good, and mountains. And underneath the tree, there's no grass, just dirt, because every tree I would play under when I was little was like this, but I don't know why. As you can see, I'm fully shading in this dirt, which is a waste of time, but I'll explain when I get there. When I was painting the background, I was thinking, as most great artists of our time have, what would Bob Ross do? Especially with the mountains. But I killed it with the background, so I think everyone should take this approach. I started with the background so I didn't have to worry about ruining anything in the foreground. Definitely not because I was worried about messing up purple, and therefore prolonging doing it. So anyways, I can't really think of anything else to say about what's going on right now, so let's go back to talking about Purple. Purple is a kind little girl, with a big imagination, but she can be a little bossy. She doesn't mean to be, she's just rather stubborn and doesn't realize that others don't want to do certain things. She lives on the farm that you can see now, with her parents and possible siblings. I haven't decided yet. In order to continue talking about Purple, I have to tell you about the potential story that she could live in. You know Bluey, right? What am I saying? Of course you know Bluey. So you know those episodes where the kids are just playing at school? Yeah, that's what I imagine the majority of the story would be like. But specifically like Bluey, and not like Backyardigans, because unlike Backyardigans, the kids would not be transported to the different worlds that they made up. We would just see them playing, like in the Bluey episodes. Most of the times the kids would be playing at school during recess. Sometimes the kids would be at each other's house or a park, something to change things up, but the majority of the story would be at school. This would be a kid's show, by the way, if you haven't figured that out. But what do I mean, other kids? We only know Purple right now. Well, this is where I have to ask you a question. Do you like this video? You don't have to answer right now. But if you do, I could make more videos like this, where I turn my other stuffed animals into the other characters. Continuing with the kids, I have bad news for Purple. She's definitely not the main character. Hopefully a beloved side character, but not the main character. As of right now, the main character may or may not be a pair of puppies I previously mentioned. But I have imagined an episode where the cast would go to Purple's house and realize she doesn't have very many toys. This would cause the other kids to learn the lesson of imagination. Her bossiness could also be used to teach many lessons. So she has an important place in the story. She's just not the main character. Now back to me painting. You can hopefully tell that I'm adding the shadow that the tree is casting. To do so, I'm painting over the spots with a darker color, meaning that all the stuff I did to the dirt originally is now all covered up. I'm leaving some spots within the shadow lighter, where the light is coming through the leaves, in both the grass and the dirt. I did this because I had a really vivid image of this in my head, but also because I wasn't sure if you could tell it was supposed to be a shadow, and I thought this would help sell it. I used the same dark green I used for the shadow to add little blades of grass for more detail. Also, shameful self-plug. I do commissions now if you're interested, link in the description. Through the whole process of making this painting, I would start a section and immediately think I had ruined the whole thing. But I've learned to trust the process, even if I don't trust myself. I enjoyed painting this whole piece, but there are definitely spots that stress me less than others, and this tree would be one of those spots. I think that's because I'm so used to painting wooden textures. Whether that be trees or flooring, I've really learned to enjoy drawing wood. I'm going to use this moment to acknowledge how bad the tape looks. It's not aesthetically pleasing at all, but it's the only tape I have that will actually keep the paint from getting underneath. And yes, I did paint a little brown smiley face on it, which is not helping. But the other two smiley faces were done by my little sisters, who were in and out of my room throughout the whole process of painting this. The greeny blue color reflecting onto the tree ended up being my favorite thing in this entire painting. I add other colors into the shadows all the time when I'm drawing digitally, but it's not something I often add to my traditional artwork. I don't know why, because even digital, it ends up being one of my favorite things in the piece. Now that I'm adding the trees to the background, I can tell you about a minor thing that annoys me in this painting. Those two closer background trees, it only slightly annoys me because it's so hard to notice. I know that because I only noticed it well after I had finished the painting, but something about the depth of the trees looks wrong. I either needed to push the farther of the two trees back, or I needed to make it bigger. I'm not sure. Something about it is just slightly off, and although it's not that big of an issue, it still bothers me a little. Adding the leaves to the trees was simple enough because I kept them fairly simple. I definitely wasn't going to paint every leaf, but I chose to highly simplify it as these trees are not the main focus of this piece, so I didn't want them to take away from purple. And now, I finally get to paint the star of the show herself, Purple. Well, we've already discussed how Purple wouldn't be the star of the show she would be in, but she's the star of this video. I was very stressed when starting Purple, as I quite liked the background, and if I screwed Purple up, then I was not going to be very happy, and would have wasted my time painting this as I would not have posted it if I had messed it up. So as you can see, because I did post it, I didn't completely screw her up. I only slightly messed her up, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I had to be very careful as I was painting Purple, because when I cover anything in the background, I can't really go back over it to fix it. One of the cons of starting with the background, I guess. I went back and forth a lot on Purple's face, changing things ever so slightly. I made her white lighter, added more blush, adjusted her yellow spots, got rid of the blush entirely, and this isn't even talking about the non-yellow parts of her face. This kind of work is tedious, but I find it much more enjoyable than drawing backgrounds or landscapes. Oh, and I ended up adding the blush back. In my sketch of Purple, I had her nose kind of blend into her face. That sounds wrong, but that's the best description I can think of. I did not succeed in adding this detail to the painting, however, because at some point, I realized it was going to come down to having the blend, or whether or not I was going to be able to see that this was supposed to be a nose. The nose, the inside of her white ear, and her blush are all the same pink. I would have done this if I had drawn this digitally too, because I try to reuse colors when I can to try to make a design more cohesive. Like how I used the color I used as the highlights for the white, as the highlights on the nose, and in the eyes, but we'll get there. For the shading in the lighter ear, I used the same color that's the base color for the darker ear, not for the sake of cohesiveness, but because I didn't want to mix a new color. Yeah, I don't like mixing colors, which is probably why I usually draw digitally, but I was pretty proud of my color mixing abilities during this painting. My mixing abilities most likely improved because my patience improved. I took my time to make sure that I not only made the colors I wanted, but that I also mixed the colors fully, much to the annoyance of editing me, because the noise of scraping my paint palette with my palette knife to mix the paint was so annoying. So between my horrid singing, my younger sisters doing whatever they're doing, and me mixing paint, the sounds of the unedited video are interesting. For details like the horns, hooves, and even the eyes, I used the same brown. I think I used the same brown for the eyebrows. I just used a different color as the highlights, but I'm not sure. I was being very careful not to screw up the eyes, as I think they're one of the most important parts of any character. I mean, I was fully prepared to mess with the eyes even more than I messed with the face, but I don't think I had to, so that's good. When I start shading the eyes, you'll really start to see where the Eevee inspiration comes in. I added some spots where the sun shines through the leaves onto purple, because in my original vision for this piece, she had a big spot right across the middle of her face. But I worked really hard on her face and didn't want to ruin it, so I didn't do that. I'm not sure I like the ones I did add though. I thought adding them would better show that she was in the shade, but I don't think it helped. For some reason, shading Purple's foot hooves, toe hooves? They're not her back hooves because she's bipedal. Guess I'm gonna have to come up with an official title. Purple's toe hooves, that's what I'm going with, were very easy and somewhat satisfying to shade, though I do wish I added another highlight to them because they blend into the dirt way too much. But I didn't because I was running out of patience, and she's supposed to be in the shade, so she can't have that many highlights. I did this all in one day because I knew that if I didn't get it done that day, it would be months before I would actually get it done, and it would take me months to edit. So I blame you for me rushing it, because if I didn't have to get it done for this video, then I wouldn't have been painting till midnight. Now I'm starting on Purple's sweater, and I had a very specific, unspecific vision for how her sweater should look. But that vision wouldn't have worked with the way I did the rest of the painting, so I gave up on that. But it still looks good, don't worry. Sometimes you just have to adjust your vision for your art to fit the reality of your art. I did the sweater by mostly shading the darker green of the sweater before adding the lighter green stripes to the sweater, and then shading those. Much like the toe hooves. You know what? Saying that again, I'm not sure that's the best option. I feel like this sweater needed one shade darker or lighter to really finish it, but minor problems. My main problem in this piece comes later. Wait, actually, I already did my main problem with this piece. It's her face. It's not that much of an issue, but it is rather annoying, because somewhere along the way, her face became more circular and lost its cow-shapedness. Also, I think it needed something, I don't know what though, to make the face less flat. Now doing the skirt overall thing. And yes, the same way the rest of Purple has needed one more shade to really finish it, so did the skirt. But I was tired and was feeling lazy, so she has some small shading issues. These are minor issues though. I promise I do like this piece. The overalls were the final part of Purple in this piece, and now I can get to the part I've been really excited to do, which is... Oh yeah, my phone died, and I didn't notice because I was so focused on painting the flowers, the part that I was really excited to do. But you don't get to see me paint the flowers. So... I added a purplish color to some spots on Purple to try to replicate the amazingness of the blue on the tree, and abrupt change, my phone died again. To soothe your anger at me for not having the footage, we will watch the satisfying tape pull. Oh, so satisfying. Oh yes, I'm definitely not mad at my phone for dying twice, even though it was literally charging. I quite like this piece. Aside from Purple's face, I have no major problems with it, and even that's not that big of a problem. I love the background, specifically the mountains and the grass, but my favorite part of this painting is the tree behind Purple. But what do you guys think? Do you like this kind of video? Would you like to see me create more characters for my stuffed animals? Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.